right, everyone. So last week, we covered a lot of topics when it came to Unity, including how to create a Unity project, how to add 3D, how to add models, how to add, files in general. We added audio. We added more physics, collider-based stuff. So adding physics like gravity or the ability to collide with things. We also talked about aspects like colliders and triggers, things like that. We also talked about user interface or UI there and how to export it, right? Another topic, some people covered this in their 427 and some didn't, is the ability to animate objects, okay? So I'm going to talk about how to animate objects in Unity. I'm also going to talk about how to animate 3D models in Blender or find models with animations attached to them that you can also use within Unity. Okay. So what you want to do is you want to open up the files for today called Unity Animation. And there's basically just one scene here. Give it a second. Okay. And I have this world here, and it's real basic. There is a red cube. Okay, nothing special. I'm gonna go to game mode and let's hit play. And in theory, nothing should happen. Let's see if I'm correct. And nothing's happening. Okay. What I want to do is I want to animate this cube. Okay. So we're going to talk about animation. And I cover this, also in my slides. So animation is always great in a Unity world. It adds more life, makes things more interesting. What you have to understand is in Unity, there are several components that make a object animated, okay? There's the model that's animated. There's something called the animator, which is the thing that controls the animations that the object or the model does. And then there's the actual animations themselves. So for instance, if I have a character, like I don't really have an action figure here, but like I have this model here, or this model, this is a statue. Let's just say for the sake of argument, I could make this character spin, but also maybe move its arms or move its head. Each one of those could be a separate animation that are all controlled by the animator that all are part of one model. Okay, which case was that statue. So the way it works is like there's the model, there's the animator, and it can control the animator's job as part of the model is to control the various animations. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to work with animation. Now, normally, what we're going to do in this first example is I'm going to take an object that already exists, this model. I just, went to, object, 3D object, cube and made this. What we're going to do is add an animation to this character. The way we're going to do that is we're going to go under Window in Unity, and we're going to go down where it says Animation. And I'm going to click on this, it says Animation, and that's going to create a tab. Okay. You can leave it where it is, but what I'm actually going to do is drag it here so I can kind of work with it. Okay. And right now I have a timeline and I don't really have any object that I'm working with yet. So what I want to do is to make an animation for this object using the animation panel, make sure the object is highlighted. And then inside of the, you'll notice that says to begin animating cube, create animation clip. Now what you do is if you click this, what's going to happen is it's going to make a file. What that file is the information related to the animation, okay? So every specific animation that your character does is a separate file that needs to be named. Now, what I did is I made a folder for you guys called animations, which currently is empty. And I'm going to make an animation for this cube. Let's just say for right now, I'm going to call this animation cube move, okay? And I'm going to hit save. This is going to make a file or a data file whose job is to save all of the animation information related to cube move, okay? Now this is my timeline, and it's being measured in frames. So this is 5 frames, 10 frames, 15 frames. Essentially, there's 30 frames in a second or 60 frames. I forget for games. It's either 30 or 60. Normally TV is 30, but I think for this it might be 60. I think it's 1 second, so I might be wrong there. But what I'm going to do, and you can use your middle mouse button to kind of zoom in and out here, as you can see I'm doing. What I'm going to do is I want to animate this, and all I'm going to have it do is I want to have the box go up, or the cube, and then I'm going to have it come down, okay? So you could use these things here, but what I'm going to do is click on this option that says Enable Disabled Keyframe Recording Mode. And what that means is once I click it, anytime I change my model using like the Move tool or the Rotate tool or the Scale tool, what it's going to do is create a keyframe. And a keyframe is a saved point, okay? So what I'm really trying to do here is I'm trying to start here. Let me use a different color for my... I'm trying to start here at the bottom, go up here, and then basically come back down, okay? So I need 1 point where it's at the bottom, 1 point where it's at the top, or 1 keyframe, and then another one at the bottom again, okay? So the way I would do this is I'm going to put my animation or my time marker right here, and I'm going to hit that. And I'm just going to like move my object up and then down slightly. And you're going to see that what it happened here is it created. Oops. Let me change that real quick. I'm going to move it up and then down. And that's going to create what's called a keyframe. A keyframe is essentially a saved point. What it is data that basically tells Unity or the program at this point in time, 000, beginning of the animation, my character exists at this position, this rotation, and this scale, okay? I'm going to move forward to 30 frames or half a second. And once you have this auto keyframe on, anytime I make changes, it'll automatically keyframe. So if I move this up, you're actually going to see how it made a second keyframe? And then I'm going to go back to here, and I'm going to bring it back down. And you can see that it made 3 keyframes. This is the information of where the object started. This is where the information of the object when it hit the highest point. And this is the information of the object when it comes back down. Okay. I'm going to turn this off. And that is now my animation. So if I play this back, you can see what it looks like. When it comes to animation, I don't want to get too deep into it because this is not a motion graphics class, but essentially, if something is too fast, you want to put more space between the keyframes. So in other words, like if I felt that this action was happening too fast, what I would want to do is take these keyframes and kind of space them out a little bit. Now, if you're wondering why we would do that, essentially, the answer is really physics. Speed equals distance divided by time, okay? The distance is how far the object is moving up or down. So if it has more time to go the same distance, it actually will go, the speed of the object will be slower, okay? The way I like to think of it is like, let's say you have to travel 100 miles, right? And you have 2 hours to do it. Well, math would say you have to go, if we're doing it equidistantly or in terms of constant speed, you're going 50 miles an hour, right? Now, let's say instead of you're going that same 100 miles, but now you have 4 hours instead of 2 hours. Well, if you're doing it consistent, you'd be going 25 miles, right? Because you have more time to go the same distance. That's what happens when I did this. By me dragging this out farther from each other, I'm giving there more time between the actions, which is going to cause it to slow down. So if I play back, you can see it's going a little slower than it was. If I think it's too slow, I can bring keyframes closer to each other. That would do the opposite. So in my analogy here, imagine you had 2 hours to go 500 miles. You'd be going 50 miles an hour. But now if you only have 1 hour, well, you have less time to go the same distance. The only way to do that is to go faster. And that's what would happen here. So by bringing these closer, my action has to go faster. Okay. So you can play around with, you know, how the speed of things. Okay. Now that was fine. I like it. I'm going to turn off, go back here. And what I'm going to do is highlight the model again. And I'm going to add a second animation. Okay. That was the character going up and down. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click here and I'm going to say make new clip or create new clip. Okay. This is going to allow me to make another animation. So I'm going to make an animation where the cube is going to spin. I'm going to call it cube spin. Okay. Now you'll notice I get a new timeline, right? Because this is a completely new animation. And once again, I'm going to hit the record button. This time, what I'm going to do is use the rotate tool. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to start on 0 degrees for the y-axis. And then after 1 second, I wanted to go one full rotation, which would be 360 degrees. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just kind of go to 1 second here. And I'm just going to, I can do this by hand by just typing in 360. And you can see that it added that second keyframe. So what it's, these are save point once again. So at the beginning, I'm at 0 degrees in terms of the y direction or the y-axis. And then at 1 second, I'm at 360 or one full rotation. Okay. Okay, I'm going to turn this off. Let's do one more. I'm going to make one where the cube starts small and then it grows big and then it grows small again. We call this a pulse in animation. So I'm going to go over here, make new clip. I'm going to call this cube scale, let's just say. And once again, I'm going to click on this. And this time I'm going to use the scale tool. And I'm just going to say, okay, let's set it at 1.3. That's kind of like the default, okay? And then after 1 second or half a second, which is 30 frames, let's make that, I don't know. I'm just gonna use the scale tool here. Scale it to like, let's make it 3 by 3 by 3. There you go. And then at 1 second, I'm gonna set this back to, what was it? Like 1.3, yeah. So I'm gonna set it back to 1.3. Okay. And if I play back my animation, oops, let me turn this off. Now let's play back. Okay, you can see it's growing and shrinking. Going a bit fast, so I don't know. I kind of like it that way, but all right. So I'm done with my animation now. And what I'm going to do is go to my project. And if you go to that folder with animations, you can see how it created these 3 little sort of rounded triangles with these lines on it. And it has the name of my animations, which is cube move, cube scale, and cube spin. Okay. Now, if I were to play this, I don't think anything's going to happen. Maybe, maybe not. Oh, I guess it's okay. It is doing the cube move by default. Okay. And if I actually click on this, you'll notice in my inspector over here, see how it says loop time? What this means is that it'll keep looping the animation. So, you know, if I were to play this, my animation really only had the cube go up once and then down. So I'm going to hit play. But now you can see that it's looping. Okay. If I didn't want it to loop, I could just turn off loop time and then it will run once, but it won't, you know, it won't keep looping. So it should run one time and it does, and then it's done, as you can see. Okay. Now I'm gonna turn that back on. Now, right now it's defaulting to the cube move, but what if I wanted to run one of the other animations as opposed to the cube move? Well, there's something called that is the job of the animator, okay? And this thing is the animator controller or the animator, okay? So what I'm going to do is, in order to, we're going to open up, if you don't have this, there's a panel called the animator panel. I'm going to click on that. And it's going to have this kind of 2D look here. And I'm using my my scroll wheel to kind of like zoom in and out here. And you'll notice that it has the name of my animations, which in this case are cube move, cube spin, and cube scale. Okay. Now you'll notice how it says entry. Entry means when this object enters the game or enters the world, which since the object is already in there by default, that basically means from the beginning of the game or the beginning of the world. And it's saying when this object enters, which animation do you, if any, do you want it to play? And it's playing cube move. But let's say I wanted it to do cube spin. Well, what I could do is I could right click and I could say set as layer default state. I'm going to do that. And you can see this now turns orange. What this means is this animation is now the default animation. Okay. And if I go back to game and I hit play, it should now do the cube spin as opposed to the cube move. And it does. And I looped it, so it's always going to just keep doing that animation. Maybe I wanted to do the scale. Well, let's go back here. I could click on this and choose that as the default state, or the default, the default state. And if I go back and I run it, now the scale should be the default one. Okay. And it's what it is. But let's just say for the sake of argument, I don't want it to necessarily defaultly run any of these. Okay. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make a new state. I'm going to call it empty. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a name. I'm just going to call this state. I'm going to give it a name up here. And I'm just going to call it like default. Okay. And I call it default because essentially it's just what the object will default to. And it doesn't have any animations or anything applied to it. Okay. And I'm going to set that as the default. Okay. What that means is my object, when I play, nothing's going to happen. Okay. Now, what if I wanted to trigger one of those animations, like the cube move or the cube spin? So here in my game, here's my cube. And you're going to notice that the cube has that animator. That's what this is being applied to it, or an animator component called, and we're using the cube animator component. Okay. And that's what this is. So it's basically telling this model, the cube model, what to do when the cube starts, which in this case is go to default. What I want to do is maybe we want to have some sort of input, like a key input, where if I hit a key on my keyboard, it's going to launch one of these other animations. Now we can actually write a script for that. I have a little script here, and if I open it up into Visual Studio Code, you can take a look at what it is. And I'm not going to get like super deep into it, but essentially what I'm doing is, remember when we, for the audio, we created an audio object called audio source, and it was a special type of variable. There's also an animator variable too. And that's what this is. And I've given it the name of anime, or, however you pronounce that. And essentially this is a variable or a container. And I'm making that container equal to this component. Okay. So this component is an object, and I'm loading it into this variable. Then what I'm doing here is I'm using, remember we did keyboard and we did like, this is essentially checking to see if someone presses a key on their keyboard. Well, what I'm saying here is if someone presses the up arrow key, we're checking to make sure that this is not equal to nothing. Then what we're doing is saying, okay, why don't we play a particular animation that's part of this animator? So here I have a couple of animations: cube spin, cube move, cube scale. I'm going to put the name of the animation. It's case sensitive. So let's do cube spin. Okay. Now in this case, I'm using the up arrow. If you want to set it to a different keyboard player, I have the Unity. I have a link for this in your module, which is a link of like every keyboard command. So I'm using up arrow, there's down arrow. You could do other keys on your keyboard if you wanted to. Okay. So what this is saying is when, we made a variable, an animator variable, we loaded in that animator component as an object, and then that animator component had a method or a function built into it that plays an animation. That's what this is. And I'm saying play CubeSpin, which is it's that code file that has all the information for that particular animation. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to save this and I'm going to go back. And at least for the up arrow, this should work. So what I'm going to do is go back. And if I hit play, nothing's going to happen by default. But if I hit the up arrow, where's the down arrow? Oops, sorry. I forgot to actually add the script. Let's add that script to my object. Now let's do it. Now it should work. Okay. So now when I hit the up arrow, it's doing the cube spin. Okay. So I'm going to go back. Let's go back to my code. And so that's up arrow is doing the cube spin. Let's do down arrow. And I'm going to load in the cube scale animation. So let's do that. Cube scale. And maybe I'm going to do one more. Let's do left arrow. Left arrow is going to make my character move, which was cube move. And I'm also going to do one for the right arrow. And that'll just do the default state. Okay. All right. Saved my code. Hopefully that made sense. Basically, I've just set up other keys to run the other animations that I have. And I can make more animations and add them to my code if I wanted to. So I'm going to hit play. And I'm going to hit the up arrow, down arrow, left arrow, and right arrow. And right arrow goes back to default, and now I'm just doing nothing. And I could shift between any of these. Okay. All right, I'm going to do one more thing here.